Committee for the 16th of September 2024. What I'll do is, I'll introduce myself first. My name's Councillor Tony Dyer and I'm the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee. What I'll do, I'll ask members of the committee to introduce themselves as and when we get to the questions and statements. Also, just to mention that this meeting is being webcast, and just to quickly outline the emergency evacuation procedure. In the event of the alarm sounding, because we're not expecting a test, please leave the room calmly into the main area of the foyer, through the front door of City Hall, turn right and walk down the ramp towards the cathedral, and the assembly point is in front of the cathedral. Okay, agenda item number 2, apologies for absence and substitutions. Can I check there are any apologies or substitutions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We had apologies from Councillor Gooch and Councillor Classic is substituting.
Welcome, Councillor Classic. Agenda item number 3, declarations of interest. Can I ask any committee member if they have any interest to declare in relation to the items of business on the agenda? Councillor Wennard.
I'm a member of the Bristol Energy Cooperative who are invested in the solar array on the Bottle Yard studios, so I'll be leaving for that item. I'm aware you're planning to take the items with exempt papers at the end, aren't you? So could I ask that you do cyber first and then Bottle Yard so I can then just exit?
You can certainly ask.
Thank you.
Councillor Stafford Townsend.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that my professional background is stage and screen, and I sometimes work with organisations based at the Bottle Yard, but I don't have any financial interest in them, so I don't have to recuse myself from it, but just to say.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 4, minutes of the previous meeting. Can I move the minutes of the previous meeting of the committee held on 12th of August as a correct record? Do I have a seconder? As we certainly get somebody else to second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Everybody okay to approve the minutes? Thank you. Let's move on to the next agenda item. Agenda item 5 is Chair's announcements, and as Councillor Wennard has indicated, we are going to do the agenda items in a slightly different order. The reason for that is because agenda item 12 on the future of the Bottle Yard studios and agenda item 13 on cyber security and related procurement do have exempt papers. And therefore, if the members of the committee want to discuss items that are exempt, we will need to move into exempt session. In order to do that, the committee members were moved to the relevant room along with the relevant officers. And I'll tell you which room that is as and when we get to it. And the order we're going to do this is because, as Thomas said, he won't be able to speak on Bottle Yard Studio, so I'd see no point in making Tom stay longer than he needs to. So we'll do agenda item 12 after agenda item 13. Just to be clear, however, that for the decision making for each of those items, that will need to be done in public. So we'll come back into the room for the decision making itself. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 6 is public forum. We do have 6 questions submitted to public forum. All the recipients have received written answers. Looking in the public gallery, I can see we have Dan with us. So Dan, question number 3, do you have a follow-up?
Not to that one, but I've got 2 follow-ups to my question, the other questions.
Question number 4.
4 and 5, yeah, I believe it is. There are 2 separate questions in there. So first follow-up question is, when is it expected that Bristol City Council will know the result of its appeal to the ICO?
I'm unable to answer that. I don't believe we have anybody from the legal team, and obviously that may depend on the ICO's response.
Okay. Can I have that in a written?
You can have that in a written response, yes.
And the other part was, the question was, why is Bristol City Council appealing the enforcement notice of the ICO? I was quite disappointed by the written answer, which gives no information. My question is, why are we not being told why Bristol City Council is spending our money to prevent us getting information that we should have access to through the Freedom of Information Act?
I'll get your response to that in writing.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, it's the end of public forum. Let's moves us on to the first agenda item, which is agenda item number 7, the Transformation Programme Quarterly Update. This report provides us with an update on the top 4 council transformation programmes, which are adult social care, our families, children and education, property and tackling homelessness. There are no decisions to be taken on this report, which is for information. And I would like to invite Tara Dillon, Head of Portfolios, Programmes and Projects, to introduce and outline the report. Tara.
Thank you. So I'm attending today on behalf of the report author, Sir Vanessa Wilson, the Transformation Portfolio Director, has put this report together for you today. So as outlined there by Councillor Dyer, it's an update on the top 4 transformation programmes, so adult social care, our families, property programme and tackling homelessness. So it is just a high-level overview. Each of those programmes will bring their detailed reports to the relevant committees in due course. So just in terms of a quick overview of what's in the report itself, the top 4 were agreed by Cabinet in June 2023 and they're funded out of the transformation budget, which is a fund totalling £21 million. To date, the baseline position for the top 4 is that there's going to be a total forecast spend of £13.5 million, which will support the delivery of £17.5 million recurrent general fund savings from this financial year onwards. Additionally, there's also £21.6 million worth of capital receipts associated with the property programme. In terms of a really high-level overview then of the top 4, 3 of the programmes have remained largely unchanged in terms of their broad ambition and scope. So adult social care programme strives to ensure that people get the right help at the right time to promote their independence and to reduce or delay the need for longer-term support. The Our Families programme, which is within children's and education, is seeking to redesign the effective services for all of our children and young people and families with efficiency and delivery and how we provide those services as part of a whole systems change. Just to note, this programme is currently in exception and there's been a health check undertaken and senior officers are considering that and looking at ways in order to offer countermeasures and identify mitigations to deliver the programme going forward. The property programme seeking to deliver both revenue and capital receipts and it's reviewing our council estate through disposals, office rationalisation, Temple Street refurbishment, commercial let, corporate catering review and the implementation of a corporate landlord function as well as supported it by an asset management system. The Tackling Homelessness programme then is the one that has evolved since its original proposition. So this was previously the temporary accommodation project. There's now a broader remit associated with this programme where it aims to reduce overspend on the subsidy loss budget by addressing both the supply of lower cost temporary accommodation and then stabilising and then ultimately reducing demand in TA placements going forward. All of the programmes have been baselined in terms of spend, savings, delivery, scope and timescales, and they're being managed by exception, which means they're only returning to CLB if any of their tolerances are breached. Otherwise, they're progressing underneath the oversight of their programme boards. Committee are asked then to note this update.
Okay, thank you, Tara. Any comments or questions from members? Councillor Wenard.
So I've got 2 questions, both which may need to be taken away. The progression of setting up a council-owned registered provider, is there any indication of the likely timelines for when something will be coming forward to consider by the policy committee? I'll take the second one after.
So I'll need to come back to you with the answer to that one, yes.
John, do you want to?
Well, I was going to say the same. Rather than give an update here, we'll come back to you, Councillor Reynolds.
Okay, your next question.
This is a request for a briefing for the committee about the acquisitions programme for housing, which does form part of the Tackling Homelessness programme as I understand it, but there's no reference to it in the update. So it'd be good to understand what's happening with that and how it's progressing, because obviously it's quite fundamental to some of the savings that need to be met. So could we get a briefing outside this policy committee on what's going on?
Yes, I don't know if you want that with housing as well, because they're obviously being put up to speed. But yeah, happy to provide information, not a problem.
Okay, I'll discuss with the chair of Homes and Housing Delivery how best to do that. I believe you're on both committees, aren't you? Oh, okay. I'll discuss it with Councillor Parsons. I'm sure we can do that. Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. The first one's about the Adult Social Care Programme, in particular the commissioning framework. So I've had some kind of concern about the equity in supplier kind of enrolment in that, and it seems that there's a huge amount of providers, and I've asked this question on a couple of occasions when this subject has come up, but I don't seem to be getting the right response or a response. There is going to be opportunities for all, and it's going to be quite equal in the way that people are able to apply for to be a provider for care. I'm not sure if you've got any information about that, but it would be good to be updated on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so I will have to take that one away and we'll come back to you with a clear response.
And then the second one, again, is about the Adult Social Care Programme with regards to the technology-enabled care. So how is the adoption of technology-enabled care progressing, and what's going to be the measure? How are we going to be able to measure the outcomes on transformation, with regards to transformation, whether it's working?
Again, I will get that clarity from the project team and come back to you.
Abdul, I'm just going to bring Paul in on this.
Thank you, and they're important questions that Councillor Malik raises. The paper references that the relevant work streams in this programme will be coming to the next meetings of their respective committees, so including adult social care. And probably that level of detail needs to be explored by the committee at their next meeting. I think definitely, Chair, if you agree, we could just make sure that the committee has the opportunity. I don't know whether Councillor Malik sits on that committee as well, but that level of detail probably is for that committee rather than here, where I don't think we've got an officer with the relevant expertise available to answer your questions.
And maybe it's something that I'm not quite getting, but I'm on the Strategy and Resources Committee, which is where the strategy and resources are discussed. I also sit on the Finance Committee, and I've been looking for answers to some of these questions. I'm not sitting on any of the committees where, the 8 policy committees. So, I think that information needs to be available to other people as well. And it may be that one policy chair wants to know about another policy's, area and the finances. It's proving quite difficult to get the information. So I'm not sure, but maybe Chair can...
Yeah, I think Tara said that to come back to you, but I think at the same time, no, it is perfectly reasonable for councillors to ask questions of other committees. It is open to all members to put questions forward, but we can discuss in more detail about... I think that's one of the things we're viewing is how the best way is to get information, because there are so many different sources of information that's available now.
Thank you, Chair, and that's part of the reason why I raise it here, because I think it's really important that we have that information. Can I go on to, so I can probably get responses to those 2 questions, can I go on to the next? So, with regards to the property programme, Temple Street fit out, so we have, I suppose we just need to have an update on the leasing of 100 Temple Street to the NHS, and maybe more details about the expected financial returns on that, to see the benefit to the city and to the council's finances.
Thanks, Councillor. So the fit-out's going really well. So there are 4 floors and 8 floor plates in Temple Street, and the NHS have been refitting out on the north wing, so it'll be the ground floor, first floor, second and third. and they are also updating a reception on the right-hand side, so there'll be a public-facing reception on the right. Full year expected rental income will be circa £1 million for the council, and we expect them to be in the next couple of months. So, some are there, but there's still, yeah.
I mean, so just to add to that, if I may, I met with the chief executive of the ICB Friday, and he personally is already there. He said, and very happy about it. He's very satisfied with the new arrangements.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Whippington.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small thing. On page 22, it mentions the Bottle Yard Studio coming to Strategy and Resources Committee in August. That obviously didn't happen, as we only had one item on the agenda in August. I was wondering, why that didn't happen, because it would have been used. I'm getting a bit concerned about sort of the time that everything is taking. So I'm just wondering that, but also it does suggest that this report was written before August. I'm wondering how up to date this report is. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Chair. Rather belatedly, I noticed that same drafting issue on over the weekend, and that should have been corrected. But yes, you're correct, of course, that the original intention had been, I think, that the Bottle Yard report would come in August. And maybe when we get to that point, we could also, with your agreement, Chair, just explain why it didn't come to August, but rather to this meeting. But the drafting point is, misleading, and we should have picked that up.
Any more questions or comments? Okay. So agenda item number 7, as I said, was for noting. So the recommendation of the report is that the Committee for Strategy and Resources notes the background update report on the top 4 transformation programmes. Can I take that as therefore noted? Thank you. That concludes the item. We'll now move on to agenda item number 8, which is the Property Transformation Programme update. As the Chief Executive mentioned, is each committee will get a further detailed report on each of the 4 items, depending on which committee it is. And in our instance, we get the Property Transformation Programme update. And also, don't forget, we have agenda item 9 after this about the Property Working Group as well. So this report provides an update on the scope and progress of the Property Transformation Programme. There are no decisions to be taken on this report, which is for information. And I would like to invite Pete Anderson, the Director of Property, Assets and Infrastructure, to introduce and outline the report. Pete.
Thanks, Chair. So, as the Chair said, this outlines the background of where we are with the Property Transformation Programme. It breaks down some key elements, and I'll draw some of those to your attention in a moment, as well as it does give you information in terms of key activity for Q2 of this year, 3 and 4, and some activity into 2025-26. So the focuses of the programme has looked at 2 key areas of our property division, one particularly around corporate landlord, as well as estate rationalisation. So we've realised and give the attention that we do need to have an effective corporate landlord. So we do need to manage our assets as well as we can, as efficient as we can, to enable us to invest where we need to, and in the context of commercial return, ensure that our investment estate is healthy and is able to generate income for us as the council. So the corporate landlord service focuses not only on our operational assets, our development assets, particularly in land, as well as our investment stroke commercial assets. Estate rationalisation is really important for us too, in relation to where we identify assets that are surplus, that we're able to dispose of them in the correct way. Further to working with colleagues across the council, ensuring that if a asset, for example, is for surplus for operational requirements, it could also potentially be repurposed for accommodation, etc. Whether that be supporting our colleagues in children's services, adults, or temporary accommodation. The project has 8 strands of focus work. And under section 2 of the report, it brings to life those 8 areas. I mentioned about corporate landlord. We are looking to deliver a new hard FM contract. So we are going to go out to tender for procurement of our new service. We are also introducing and going out to tender for a new asset management system to enable us to be as intelligent as we can on our estate, look at life cycle modelling, and once again make best use of our funds to ensure that our compliance is where it needs to be across particularly our built estate. Corporate catering, to look at how we deliver our corporate catering across the services for the council, and there's a piece of work for us to bring that together and to look at the best return on investment for our investment in our service delivery. Print and mail, we have a contract with Xerox, and we are delivering a programme that is going to onboard services to enable us to be as efficient as we can in relation to print, as well as looking at the different types of approaches to print and mail. From a previous question to this meeting, the Temple Street fit out, we've mentioned around our partnership with the NHS. We are also actively seeking to let 2 other floor plates out of the 8, and we've had some really good news recently, so that is a real good opportunity for us to generate more income and work with partners across the city. Disposal and estates review, building on the reference to estate rationalisation and ensuring that we are able to manage our assets effectively, and in essence have an estate that is fit for purpose and is able to, for our colleagues to work effectively in locality also. And the 8th strand of work, I think, will be picked up through the Bottle Yard Studio item later on. But that was seen as a key asset within the property portfolio, and I know you'll get an update on that. That financially, the report refers to benchmarking of revenue and saving targets, as well as achieving capital receipts targets. So we are committed to be saving 1.2 million in terms of revenue savings through the programme, as well as a pipeline to achieve 21.6 million from capital receipts. And yeah, I'll leave it there, but the paper is to note. Hand back to the chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Comments or questions? Councillor Mack.
We've been rationalising estates for a few years. I can't remember how many years since, I guess, towards the beginning of my last term. And especially sort of post-pandemic, that obviously made a lot of sense in terms of how many people were actually working from the office. You know, I understand that more and more people have been moving to work in this building. What impact have we seen? Because, I mean, I would comment that it still doesn't feel like this building's actually, you know, full or over full. So, yeah, what's been the impact of our rationalisation thus far?
Pleased to say the impact on staff in relation to feedback has been positive. We did attend HR committee at the end of the previous administration to give an update in terms of the move from Temple Street core building to City Hall, and the feedback was very positive. It's been positive in the context we have allowed for some sterile space in City Hall as a core building to see whether we needed to utilise those space because of the hybrid working, flexible working that was going to be introduced to those teams that did come across. I'm pleased to say that we haven't needed to use that. So there's a conversation for us to have in terms of how to use City Hall effectively in relation to desk ratios and look at opportunities. From a locality solution, we are still evolving our offer with colleagues, particularly from adult and children's services, ensuring that the buildings that we do retain is fit for purpose for their operating model moving forward. So we have disposed of surplus assets in the community, but we haven't moved to a defined locality solution for the north, east, central and south, and we continue to work with colleagues from adults and children.
Yeah, I remember a concern that, you know, we all get these lightweight laptops with a SIM card in, so that especially those that are working out and about, you know, concerns that they're going to be sat in their passenger seat of their car having to work for an hour or something, which was obviously not what we'd be aiming for. So, yeah, trying to look at where those staff that are out and about have somewhere to go. Yeah, I don't know how much of a problem that has been.
I haven't received any technical issues, but through service engagement and conversations with colleagues, not rushing into what that locality solution is has been really important. So I think if you'd have asked me last year, we may have thought we would be a bit further down our locality hub model. However, further continuing engagement to get it right moving forward. So we will bring that in and continue to engage with staff.
Councillor Renard.
Thank you. Thank you for the updates. Good to see the work progressing. My question is in part connected with something I'd asked about in advance, and obviously we're going to be setting up this property task and finish group that's going to meet to look at, you know, when did we dispose, why did we dispose, how, you know, what we're doing to make sure that we're making best use of assets. We're thinking about children's, as you've got adults, council housing potentially, you know, make sure we're thinking about, you know, how can we meet some of the other challenges that we've got. But what would be useful to know is if there is a list of assets that are in train to be disposed of prior to that working group meeting and completing its work. It'd be good to know exactly what they are, so that we can flag any that we might have concerns around. I mean, Southmead Youth Centre is a good example, so it'd be useful if that list could actually be sent around strategy and resources, never mind who then is eventually on the property working group, which may or may not be, I guess, the same members, but so that would be my request, that could be circulated as soon as possible, just so we've got sight of that for those items that you're going to try and proceed with before the work's been done.
Yes, I think the sensitivity of the stages that those assets are in relation to be disposed, but we can ensure that they are commercially sensitive, yes, but can be shared in advance of that session.
Any more questions? Councillor sorry, I thought you had your hand up, I wasn't sure. So Councillor Mallet, then Councillor Whippington.
Thank you. It's just a question with regards to the capital receipts shortfall. So it seems that there's a £10.4 million of the 21.6 capital receipts targets been secured. What would be the plan to secure the remaining balance within savings, and the potential impact if we don't get there on the council's budget, if any?
So we continue to look at our pipeline to see if we can go faster and accelerate some disposals in relation to that could meet that shortfall. So it's a continual process in relation to assets and to continue to work with committees in the context of future pipeline. I think it's important for us to look at what type of asset and what our intention is in relation to our locality solution. So potentially, depending on the need for the organisation, is something that we would look at to ensure that we can get the released assets in line with that locality hub. We're constantly working with colleagues from finance in relation to the capital borrowing, the potential borrowing that the council operates in relation to the delivery of the capital programme. And clearly, if we don't need as much in relation to for capital to borrow, then we won't need as much receipt. And you see that movement during the year, and we monitor that regularly to ensure that we have got enough disposals to meet the need within our capital programme and the use of flex capital. So I guess the answer is we're constantly evolving and looking at creative ways that we can best use our assets in relation to disposal.
Tim.
Thanks, Chair. Just wanted to check my understanding. We've got I think we've now got a revised target to deliver 1.2 million of revenue savings. I think that's a recurring target. Can I just check? Is that in the latest version of the MTFP that was agreed at the last budget, or is that something that will have to be carried through starting in the next one?
It is reoccurring, and it is aligned with the budget.
So the last version of the medium-term financial plan had that figure running through for the next few years? Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Okay, any more comments or questions? Councillor Renard.
Sorry, just one more on that revenue saving bit. How much of that revenue saving has been delivered so far this year? I can see the capital receipt figure of 10.4. Doesn't say anything about the 1.2. Sorry if I've missed it somewhere in the report.
I can get you that figure, Councillor.
Fine.
Yeah.
Probably a small percentage as we're only on P4. You know that. Okay, so if there's no more comments or questions, then for the clarity of the committee, what we're noting is, one, that the Committee for Strategy and Resources notes the report states that the property programme's financial objectives include £1.248 million of recurring revenue savings, £749,000 of one-off savings and £21.6 million of capital receipts for 2024-2025. Two, that the Committee for Strategy and Resources notes the report states that as per baselining at COB on 14th of May, the property programme budget is £4.781 million plus £517,000 contingency held by COB. And three, that the Committee for Strategy and Resources notes the report states that as per baseline at COB on 14th of May, no funding has been approved for 25-26. The budget request for 25-26 is subject to change and will be requested via COB. Can I take that as duly noted? Okay, thank you very much. Obviously, assets disposers are an area that can be quite concerning for those of us who are always worried about public sector assets and retaining our family silver. So I think that brings us on to agenda item 9, which is about the creation of a property working group. This report seeks approval of the purpose and objectives of the property working group and associated terms of reference. This is a non-key decision, and again, I've asked Pete to speak to the report.
Thanks, Chair. So there's two elements to the report. We've got the covering report as well as the terms of reference as Appendix A. So we're bringing this to committee further to the request to set up a working group, task and finish, to look at the assets process. It's important for us to bring to life and to reassure committee in relation to how we do declare an asset surplus and to walk through the process, which will give you insight and confidence in terms of our engagement with our colleagues from various departments, divisions across the council to work through the best use for that asset if it's declared operationally surplus. As previously indicated, working closely particularly on the accommodation need for the council and the challenge for our revenue savings, particularly temporary council housing, adults and children. It's also a good opportunity for us in relation to walk through to demonstrate how we deliver best value for the council, so the process that we follow to the point of agreement and then also to dispose and to sale. It will bring to life the estate strategy board that we've created as an oversight to that decision. So rather than that decision sitting in the corporate landlord stroke property division, a group established from all divisions to have oversight and for that sign off before we advertise that we are disposing. So we haven't yet got a date for this group, but work closely with yourself, Chair, and the committee to set up a suitable date to walk through the process. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Pete. I think the committee is very keen for us to get that working group set up as quickly as possible, given, as others have mentioned, the need to move through and deliver on some of the targets that we have. Comments or questions from members? Councillor Wennard.
Thank you. Obviously, support getting this set up as soon as possible. I think one of the things I wanted to make sure we picked up was also social value as well, and how we consider social value in looking at assets that are declared surplus. And I'm just thinking about, the interface therefore with the CAT, community asset transfer process, and how that works. And I can think of examples where it's been a bit bumpy, shall we say, including with one that's ongoing in my ward, where also I've struggled to get access to information I've asked for from, not property, to be clear, from another department, housing, around kind of viability assessments and things like that. So I think one thing I want to make sure we do is we do pick up that social value side and just kind of recognise that there is a bit with the CAP process that overlaps here as well. So if we can just give that some thought and bring that into the terms of reference, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Matt, did you want to comment on anything on that, or will you save that for a later date?
I really agree that social value and the community asset transfer process and property disposal should all be linked together, and I have a very keen interest in all three of those items, and I hope to work with you on how we combine those, and to acknowledge that it is complicated and it is difficult, especially around the community asset transfer, because we have to look at our community groups that we really want to support, and as you know, I've been going through some complicated community asset transfer stuff as well, as we've both worked on, and getting that balance of supporting community organisations, looking at the value that those community organisations are going to deliver, whilst also being focused on our bottom line and our value, and a figure of 21 million of disposals. I think acknowledging that they're very difficult decisions and going to take a lot of discussion and debate, and that's why I think it is a great idea to have a proper working group to dive into that, rather than one political person or one position or just officers looking at it, because it is very complicated with a lot of different views.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions or comments? Councillor Rippington.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've got absolutely no problem with the idea of setting this committee up and what it's looking at. One thing I am starting to get a bit concerned about in my roles as whip and transport lead and on this committee is we're starting to see quite a proliferation of committees now with task and finish groups, and we've been told that they have to be at least 7 of 9 members on those committees for proportional representation, and I'm just starting to get a bit worried about the potential overload that's going to be putting on to members as we go forward. I suspect my Lib Dem and Tory colleagues might well be nodding in agreement at this one, but all the groups that I've seen have got a genuine purpose for existing, but the more of them that grow during this year, I think it's something perhaps the committee model working group, which is being re-established with 7 or 9 members very very shortly, will want to have a look at to make sure that whether there might not be a more agile way sometimes of doing some of these things, I think would be worth looking at, and whether perhaps on occasion a group might want to waive their proportionality or something if in order to get something done. Just a comment on that.
Okay, thank you, Tim. My understanding is there was a report that went to party group lead, so Tom will know a bit more about that unless it hasn't gone to that meeting, and I've got the one meeting. And I think that is, I don't think we're going to recreate the committee model working group. I think it's a committee model review group because it's entirely different membership. But yes, there's a point we're taking. I think when the committee model working group created, they suggested that each of the policy committees could have up to 2 working groups. I suspect that if every policy committee created 2 working groups, it would probably be quite difficult for us to install a number of people on them. So I think that is a discussion that probably needs to happen within that new group when it's put up as we go through the review of the process, because we are conscious that a lot of councillors are doing a lot of work at the same time as also having their own day jobs. So yeah, I think it's a good point well made, and it's something we also be conscious of. Having been, and we as Greens recognise that, having once been a very small party ourselves as well, that how hard it can be to find people to fill in those numbers. So yeah, I take your point, and we'll work on it. Any other comments or questions? Okay, this is a decision, so we do need to go to a vote on this. So, for the clarity of the committee and the benefits of any members of the public present online, the officer recommendation for this report is that the Committee for Strategy and Resources notes the report and further details supplied in Appendix A and approves the recommended approach in terms of reference for the group. I therefore move the report. Can I ask for a seconder?
Seconded and reserving my.
Thank you. Can I take the votes in favour? Show of hands, please. Okay, that's unanimous. So thank you. And we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. So agenda item number 10 is an establishment of a working group. Sorry, Tim. So this report seeks agreement to the establishment of a working group of the Strategy and Resources Committee in order to provide scrutiny, support and strategic direction to the matters relating to culture and the creative industries. This is a non-key decision, and I would like to invite Phil Walker, Head of Service, Culture and Creative Industries, to introduce and outline the report. Phil, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. So, yes, as Councillor Dyer says, the recommendation is to establish a working group across council parties in order to look not only at from a scrutiny point of view, but also from a strategic steer towards cultural matters. The terms of reference ask for a proportional representation across parties. The actual frequency of meetings can be discussed by the group once it's established. The intention would be that any decisions or recommendations made by that group would be reported back through to the Strategy and Resources group. So whilst it would be a working group essentially to support culture, any of the decisions would be reported back through. Any decisions and recommendations would happen straight after those meetings, as soon as available at the Strategy and Resources meeting. And then there'd be a general update, probably 6 monthly, depending on the request of the chair of the Strategy and Resources group. The sorts of matters that it might discuss would be things like the cultural strategy for the city, the investment strategy into culture that the City Council takes, and related matters where culture connects with regional discussions around such matters like the cultural strategy for WECA and the wider region. So the recommendation from the officer is the committee notes the report and proceeds to establish a working group for culture and adopts the terms of reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Do you have any comments or questions? Councillor King and then Councillor Classic.
Thank you. Whereas I welcome this, I've got to sort of put a little question about the lack of decision-making power of some of these groups as well, in that they don't have any, and it has to be referred back to another group to make that decision. So what can be a relatively resource-intensive process for these councillors to become, quite intensively involved with this, and yet aren't the ones able to create any decision around it. Again, I just think there's quite a few of these popping up, and I'd just urge us to be cautious with the councillors' time on this sort of thing. I don't know if Councillor Stafford Townsend would sort of align with that on the Harbour Committee, which again is another one that's requiring quite a significant amount of our time, and yet there is no decision-making capacity on that board as well. So it just, for me, puts a question in our mind about where we're using our time effectively, and if we're the councillors that are most intensively involved with that agenda, why we aren't able to make the decisions ourselves. And then another little point, again, related to the Harbour Committee, is that what's really novel about that is that we've got co-opted members on it, and that's a really interesting experience, and it brings that real depth of knowledge from those with expertise in that field, and it also feels like it's a very one city way of thinking, and I wondered whether that would be a sort of relevant line of thought to bring to something like a culture working task and finish group, which is going to develop a strategy for our city with regards to culture, to bring on some co-opted members from the industry that might be able to help inform and bring that expertise and richness to the discussions and the development of the strategy. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. So in relation to the decision-making power of the working group, I think that's probably a constitutional matter that I can't probably answer, but I would defer back to the chair. But if that's a decision of this committee, because this committee is the committee that's establishing the working group, I believe that's a decision I would defer back to the chair, because if that's the power that you want to devolve to the working group, then that's fine with me. But again, that's not for me to decide. I think that I defer back to the chair. And shall I answer respond to the second point that you made, Councillor, which was around co-opting members. So there is already a One City culture board, which is entirely made of co-opted members of the cultural sector across the city. So the purpose of that, there is already considerable devolved discussion around culture matters. The leader sits as co-chair of that, so there's political representation, and officers report and help manage the discussions in that group. The purpose of, as I understand it, the purpose of a councillor working group is to provide that kind of political steer around, rather than sometimes the One City board also gets slightly more involved in more technical discussions. So there was a distinction to be made between the working group, which was councillor representatives, of which this would be, and the One City group. That was the purpose, that's, as I understand it. Thank you.
If I can just come back quickly, is that all right?
Well, come back very quickly. I mean, we can double check the Constitution, and if it allows for the delegation of decision making from this group down to the working group, then it's something that we can agree to do as a committee. But what I'll do, I'll ask for a clarification about whether that's allowed. But then it'd have to be a decision. If it is, it'd have to be a decision of the committee, because none of us as individuals has decision making power. But we can. I'll go back, get clarification on what the constitutional situation is, and if it does allow us to delegate decision-making power to the working group, then we could bring that to the next meeting of the strategy and resources, and we can vote on whether that's what we want to do.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it's worth having a wider debate on that as well. It's more for, I suppose, groups to take away and have a little think about, because it's just that efficient use of time, isn't it? I'm sure we're all feeling it in our various groups, that strain that Tim was referencing. So I just think it's something like everyone wants to go and feel that their time is being well used, and there's a reason for it being there that is goes beyond more than a speaking exercise, and as useful as those can be. So I just think it's about that. How can we make it meaningful? But I think it's the One Culture Strategy Board, One City Cultural Strategy Board I'm quite interested in the alignment with that, because we of course do have political leadership on that with the representation of the leader of the council. So I'm just interested in how these things align. I realise that one's for the council, one's for the city, but those two things are so interlinked and interwoven. For me, I'm struggling to see how they can be differentiated. They're quite. One is quite dependent on the other, and I think that expertise and that information from the industry, and I know that there's going to be representation made by industry members, but I'd just be interested to see how we can further sort of develop that alignment between the two.
Happy to respond to that. So yeah, that would absolutely be key, and I think to ensure that there is good alignment and good communication between one group and the other, and make sure there's not duplication or pulling in different directions. And just to reiterate the point that you made, the One City Culture Board, they have expertise and experience with it, specifically within the cultural sector. So they're bringing a range of things but they don't necessarily have the strength of engagement with the citizens within your wards. So I think both groups bring different things to the table. So yeah. But absolutely, we'll make sure that there's alignment and clarity of roles between the two.
Okay, and I think what I just add is that, yeah, I'm fully supportive of the idea of us delegating decision-making to as many councillors as possible. I've spent 3 years with very little delegation of decision power, I think is a useful opportunity to take advantage of what the new governance system can provide. Councillor Classett.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually wanted to echo sort of points that Councillor King made about councillor time, and especially, as I say, when there's a lack of decision making, to ensure and to kind of say if it's possible. I know that obviously it doesn't always align with sort of budget, the decisions that need to be made, but where possible, working groups are staggered over the year so that you're not kind of piling councillors with a lot of meetings in one period. And actually it's a bit more spread out throughout the sort of municipal year. And also just to ask what the scope is for other committees that may, this may also cover areas that they focus on as well. And similarly, I guess, with the property working group as well, if there is that opportunity for other committees to feed into that work, not just through sort of the within their parties, councillors sitting on there, but actually in a more formal way.
I'll just briefly respond to that. I think that's one of the reasons why we did want to set up a subgroup, a task group, because it doesn't have to be restricted simply to members of the strategy and resources. So, for example, public health and communities, I think we'll have members of that committee will have an interest in being on this. So it does give the opportunity to spread it out to other committees as well. Farah, did you want to?
Only thing I would add was that at this point, there's only a suggestion of the frequency of the meetings. I think I would recommend it's driven by the need. So if there's urgent need to talk about some big cultural matters, then it should meet, rather than to have it every month or every 2 months. So open to recommendations from the group if it's established.
And also, Farah, perhaps we don't want to make people quiet about how long we think it might take to actually develop the cultural strategy. It may take a bit longer than anticipated. Councillor Stafford Townsend.
Thank you. Yeah, so to explicitly to respond to some of the points about the time on councillors, I'm very kind of keenly aware of the irony of getting councillors to do more work, especially for culture, seeing as it's something that we joke about in the sector, the dying of exposure, because we're always being asked to do stuff for free. So there is an irony there, but I think, as Phil said, that there's already sort of the tie-in for the One City Culture Board. There's a global culture board as well. We're doing a little refresh of that to make it more inclusive and more representative of the city. I'd love to see kind of lots of feed in from overlapping committees, so economy and skills, public health and communities, harbour, because we've talked about events as well in the harbour committee as well. And I think the key thing about this particular working group is the importance of visibility and giving culture the visibility and the importance that it's kind of not had for too long in this building amongst councillors. So I think it's a really good step to give it the visibility and the importance that it needs. And also, yeah, delegated power. Yes, please, give us more.
Thank you. Councillor Renard.
So there's a couple of things. One's a governance point just around finalising of terms of reference, and perhaps we should also delegate the authority for those terms of references to be finalised at the working groups rather than just signing them off here. Because obviously the social value point I raised hasn't been incorporated in the property one, so maybe that's just something for us to just pick up. But the broader, this working group is quite far-reaching. It's going to develop a culture strategy. I think there is the potential for this to get incredibly messy if we don't make sure we've got alignment in the way we approach the strategy development. You know, from my perspective, culture board members should absolutely be on this working group. If they're sitting there representing the city, why would you keep them separate and only have them come along and pop in an input? So I think we need to just think about this a bit more holistically and how we pull this together, how we do engagement. Because it's not just councils make the decisions, maybe, but it's a city strategy, is it not? So therefore, the way we develop it needs to be done in a co-designed way, not in a consultation and engaged way. And I think if we don't get this right, you know, it'd be very good. So I think there's further work. I think I'm supportive of progressing this, but I think there's further work to do on the terms of reference, just some of how we go about all this that can be picked up outside this committee meeting.
Okay, I think we also do have to be aware of that if we make this a decision-making body, then there is a difference of decision makers between us as councillors being elected representatives of the council and members of the culture board who are not decision makers So, but I take your point, but yeah, Councillor Whippington.
Yeah, there's also one other thing I wanted to raise, which I think there's two other whips in the room. We've discussed in whips that there are task and finish groups which have a specific task to do, and they finish, deliver a report, and they come with an SRA and have to be proportional. But there are also working groups that you can set up which don't have those restrictions on them, and therefore can be wider, can bring in people from other areas. As you say, the decision making wouldn't necessarily be part of that if you've got people from inside. But we haven't actually specified here which of those two types of group it is, and that's my understanding. But I also believe that these conversations are ongoing with Democratic Services about whether those are the two kinds of groups that exist. But this sounds to me like a working group which will work throughout the 4 years of the term on various cultural matters. So I think we need to pin that down and make sure we know what it is, and that will also then have an impact on who we can invite along to it.
Okay, and also probably what we need to do is go back and check the minutes for the first meeting when, as a group, we decided to set up these two groups and what we called it when we set the group up. But yeah, we can review that. Any more comments, questions? Phil, did you have anything further?
I just wanted to reassure Councillor Reynard that the development of the culture strategy wouldn't be just solely the responsibility of the Councillor Working Group. There's a comprehensive engagement strategy which fully engages the One City Culture Board. It also will involve the working group, but also cultural sector, citizens, and there's a clear strategy around that, and that will be driven and led by officers of the City Council. So there's no. I would just reassure you that's not the intention, that the working group takes all of that work on, and there's a comprehensive strategy in place to develop it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that's what it'd be doing, but I think who is the steering group? I guess let me frame it like that to you. Is this working group the steering group? And if so, my point is there should be culture board members on it as well. You know, we've got many examples, including the development of the homelessness strategy that's going on at the moment, which has got a lived experience co-chair, has got organisations as well as kind of councillor engagement on it. And I just want us to make sure we approach the work in a holistic way. It's a really big, important topic for the city. We need to get the way we do it right, and let's do that in a co-designed way, where we're actually kind of meaningfully engaging people in the decision-making processes, as well as consulting and engaging.
Thank you. I'll take your point. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. If there's no more questions or comments from members, so this is a non-key decision. So the recommendation from officers, the recommendation for this report is that the Committee for Strategy and Resources notes the report and officer recommendations and proceeds to establish a working group for culture and adopts the terms of reference. What I would like to add to that in agreement is subject to further discussions amongst the working group itself, or task and finish group. Is everybody okay with that line being added? Okay, I therefore move the report recommendation. Can I ask for a second?
Seconded.
Can I ask for votes in favour? That seems to be unanimous. Thank you. Left my button off. Agenda item number 11 is next on the list, which is the Arts Council England MEND 1 funding, MEND being the Museum Estate Development Fund. This report asks the committee to note an officer decision taken to approve an additional £150,000 to complete MEND Round 1 building works at Bristol Museum and Art Gallery. There are no decisions to be taken on this report. This is for information, and I would like to invite Linda Coode, Head of Collections and Archives, to introduce and outline the report. Linda.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, all councillors. This is to note the decision that was made to spend another £150,000 on this project. Bristol Museum and Art Gallery is a Grade 2 star listed building which is in receipt of £679,365 from the Arts Council Mend Round 1 Fund, which is Museum State Development Fund. £150,000 was approved from the corporate landlord's health and safety budget, and that was to meet a shortfall which was caused by tender returns being higher than was originally anticipated. All returns that came through were over budget, and the one that was chosen was the lowest. The terms of the grants meant that the project must be completed by March 2025, or it could affect another grant application for more MEND funding, which is for almost £1.8 million. So the MEND Round 1 budget of £679,365 includes match funding of 10%, which was given by Bristol Museum Development Trust. So the package of works includes boiler replacements, which happened last winter, work to the Natural History Office roof, switchgear replacements, replacement to the conservation laboratory windows, which are up in the attics, and in addition, fine art store damp proofing, which was funded by the programme, was included also in the recent tender package for procurement. As a consequence of the tender returns coming in, we identified £150,000 shortfall, and we had approached the Arts Council relationship manager, who confirmed that they would not give us any additional funding. That also, if we reduced the scope of work or requested an addition, that any element was removed, that they would formally need us to request that, and it would take us up to 2 months to process it. We were at that point looking to make sure that the project would be completed for March 2025, and that 2 months timescale would have pushed us beyond that. The Arts Council also told us that if we failed to meet the deadline of March 2025, then our application for an additional MEND Round 4 funding of £1.8 million would be at risk. We selected the items of work for MEND Round 1 from a priority list of works which was needed to be undertaken from a condition survey which was undertaken in 2021, which showed basically that £8 million worth of essential work is required to the building. So this is all considered to be priority. So the officer recommendation is to note the additional expenditure of £150,000 worth of work to the MEND project.
Thank you, Linda. Any questions or comments? Councillor Classic and Councillor Malik.
Yeah, can I just ask for clarification about why there was such a difference in the estimating for the tender and what had actually come back?
Yeah, so when the application first went in, the application was, there was a cabinet decision made in April 2022. When we did research into exactly that question to find out what the differences were, is that our understanding was that it was post-COVID, price rises have increased dramatically as a consequence, and also there was a time lapse caused by officers leaving and the project being allowed to lapse before the new project team came on board. So in that period, the prices increased substantially. So as a consequence of that, we've put measures in place to make sure that if a member of the team leaves, that they will be replaced, and that it won't happen again, basically.
Councillor Malik.
I suppose part of my question's been answered, but I'm just getting a bit worried about the increase in project costs, and really want to know what measures are in place to prevent further overruns, and how will this impact future funding applications to the Arts Council?
So in response to the first question, we have a team of officers from the museum and from corporate landlords who are now monitoring the whole project, the Mendround 1 project. And we immediately appointed contractors. The contractors are now on site and the Mendround 1 project has started. So we are looking to have completed that project before the project deadline. We are monitoring the progress, and as part of that monitoring we are reviewing the costs involved. With reference to future applications for further Arts Council funding, we have an application in at the moment. We obviously don't yet know whether or not that application has been successful, but because of our experiences on Mendround 1, we have put those processes in place where we will make sure that the budget is monitored right from the beginning, right from the earliest phases. We did have to reduce our application on Mendround 4 when we went back to the architects and got more detailed costs as part of that application process for Mendround 4. And that came in as way over our original estimates. So we accordingly retracted. We basically had to prioritise what that application would be for, and therefore we've applied for the same amount of money but for less work to be undertaken, because we have that that budget has been clarified by architects and an architectural team.
Just second, Abdul. John, you wanted to come in?
Yes, Councillor, I just wanted to add to what Linda had said. So I think very fair questions, and certainly ones that we've been asking ourselves, hasn't it, as we go through that. So I would say Linda came in after the delays, which was unfortunate, and has got a grip of this. And for our future applications, we're going to just make sure that they're set up in a way that if we do get bids that come back with increased costs, which is still a potential, that the bids are structured in such a way so that the council doesn't have to bear the risk of those additional costs. So the sorts of measures that Linda set out as how we're going to approach that.
Just one further one. So part of this overrun was to do with some works on the boiler or something, and I'm just wondering how the museum will have its goals for environmental sustainability, and whether those and also the heritage preservation kind of areas have all been considered.
Yes, so basically, whenever we have building work undertaken, we seek advice and guidance from the National Security Advisor, who works for the Arts Council, who is a museum specialist, and they basically advise us on the security elements. So, for example, the works didn't commence when we had the constable painting of the Haywain on site. We have a team of conservators who work for the museum who advise us very specifically on the environment, so making sure the relative humidity, light and so on all meets the recognised guidance levels. We have started work in the last couple of weeks on moving the art collection from its current store, while the work is actually just progressing from today, actually. And we've moved that the art collection into a temporary store, into the temporary exhibition gallery, which is monitored environmentally. So we're doing everything around the needs of the collections, and to make sure that the environment and the security is maintained at all times. It's our responsibility, and it's a key responsibility for the collections team, and we are making sure that we are working with the buildings team to safeguard those collections.
Thank you. And obviously I think you've kind of touched on it, but for future capital projects, I think we need to learn and put some things in place. Thank you.
Councillor Wennard.
Just a bit, it's kind of picking up along the same thing, really. So some of the increase in costs is the project team wasn't there, and had we got them in place sooner, we've been able to probably secure delivery, some of it at a lower cost. Some of it is to do with costs had increased anyway, right, from when we were going to put the bid in, and therefore wouldn't have been possible to mitigate by the council. And Arts Council England have effectively told you if you don't deliver, then you won't get any money out of round 4. So I think the bit I'm interested in, this is not the first time I've had this sort of issue with Arts Council England either. And obviously the real world is that there are cost inflationary impacts and things like that happen. And I think that the reflection I would offer is that I think there needs to be a bit of a conversation with Arts Council England about how we deal with project costs that are beyond the reasonable control of the council. Recognise some of those things, we need to put more pressures in, more processes in, but it sounds like there's some other bits that do need looking at with how the relationship functions with Arts Council England, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, so we now have a new relationship manager with the Arts Council, and we have regular meetings with her, and there is also another relationship manager who's just been appointed that we're in the process of making meeting arrangements with that person as well. So we basically are making sure that our relationship with Arts Council is better.
Yeah, I guess my point is we can't have the scenario that we bid for further funding and then a cost pressure emerges and they go, well, you need to find the money as a council, otherwise we won't fund you anymore. Or we're going to withhold payments from the council, which I think happened with one previous project, didn't it? So I just feel like we need to do a bit more push in there to kind of work out how we get that into a better space, because that's not workable, is it, for local authorities that are going to encounter cost pressures at times that are beyond their reasonable control.
No, understood. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, so you'll pick that up, just to clarify, with them.
Yes, I mean obviously they're the funder, councillor. So we're in ongoing discussions with them. Certainly in the past, in my experience with the MEND, we've been able to structure things so that we don't bear that cost increase risk. So that's what I'll be looking to do.
Councillor Whippington.
Yeah, thanks. Notwithstanding what Councillor Reynolds just said, I think just worth remembering how easy it is to forget the impact that COVID had on local councils in terms of increased costs and that kind of thing. And this isn't the only project where we've suffered as a result of that. And councils are still in a really precarious position as a result of having to bear massively increased costs that we didn't really get the recompense for from national government. But obviously our museums, art galleries, very important to us, and getting that next round of funding will be crucial to maintaining our buildings. So I think this is an important thing that we do, accepting all the caveats about it's not a great place to be in. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Stafford Townsend and Councillor Gillandris, did you?
Thank you. I guess I kind of wanted mostly sort of to speak a little bit about some of what's been said about our relationship with the Arts Council. It kind of goes back to the previous item about the culture working group, that we know that we haven't had an easy relationship with the culture sector and the Arts Council as a result in the last few years, but it's something that we're sort of very proactively changing now, because it's a fresh start for all of us since May. We can fresh start everything that happened before, kind of doesn't matter, and let's let that lie down and go away, and then refresh the relationship with the Arts Council. So it's something that we are very much proactively doing. It's being well received at the moment, so hopefully going forwards we won't have a sort of repeat of any past experiences or sort of issues as we did before. That's the hope, and I think everybody is very much invested in that. And yeah, as Tim said, our museums, we have to protect them. We have to make sure that they're safe and that they keep for people to visit, and also for the artworks within them. Really world important assets inside of that building as well. So it's really crucial that we do spend this money and protect our cultural heritage as we have it.
Okay, thank you. John, did you?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, echoing other members' comments, I mean, where we are is not ideal, it's not great. However, I think we were between a rock and a hard place. I don't think we had much choice other than to do what you did. So I'm happy to note the position.
Okay, thank you. If there's no more questions or comments, then we'll do exactly what John has just suggested. So the report is asking that the Committee for Strategy and Resources notes the officer decision taken on the 12th of August 2024 of additional expenditure of £150,000 to complete Mend Round 1 building works as outlined in this report. Can I take that report as noted? Thank you. The next two agenda items, as I mentioned in Chair's business, have the potential to go into exempt session. I've also just noticed that agenda item 14 also has a potential exempt session as well. So what I suggest we do is that we move to agenda item 15, which is the period 4 finance outturn report. If that's okay with everyone, and then we'll work backwards through the other reports. This report presents information and analysis to the Committee on the Council's financial performance against that approved budget and its forecast use of resources for the financial year 2024-2025. The report also informs the Committee on the delivery of planned savings for the financial year 2024-2025. There are no decisions to be taken on this report, which is for information. And I would like to invite Tony Kirkham, Director of Finance, to introduce and outline the report. See you away for a week and already I forgot your name.
Thanks, Chair. So, in brief, this is an exception report. You had a fuller report in relation to the P3 position last time we met, and we went through some of the detailed drivers there. So the overall position for the general fund is broadly unchanged at period 4, with a 22.3 million net forecast overspend after taking into account corporate items and corporate support. There is a further deterioration in relation to the housing revenue account, a couple of items there, and a further deterioration in relation to the dedicated schools grant, now with a projected outturn position of 13 million, broadly driven by the pace of change in relation to the additional places which we're looking to bring online, but also in relation to the number of children and young people presenting for support. The other areas, again, the other ring fence accounts remain as they were previously projecting to be within resources. There's a minor change there in relation to the capital programme. As we've said on a number of occasions, we anticipate that there will be a significant rebasing of the capital programme, particularly in relation to the HRA in future months, once we have assessed various other aspects. So happy to leave it there and answer any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Councillor Malik.
So I'm just going to ask, obviously we've got the finance subgroup that works under the Strategy and Resources Committee, and there's a lot of stuff we talk about that is pretty private and not necessarily in the public domain, but this report is in the public domain. I don't have anywhere that I can present what we're doing about this, about the 22.3 million overspend in the general fund. So can I ask what specific actions are being taken to mitigate this before the end of the financial year, so that that we're facing the public, so people know what's going on?
There is a range of ongoing actions. As you'll recall from the more detailed report last time, one of the areas which is driving the gap in the current financial year is the delivery of savings, and our success in that space. And we did discuss earlier in relation to the transformation programme and the delivery of savings there, which, although is substantial, it is still significantly behind plan. So the continued focus on the existing savings and their delivery. We have also introduced in recent weeks a number of further internal controls in relation to expenditure, and looking to review pay expenditure and non-pay in quite a detailed form. We're also looking at our income streams and our debt collection pieces, the overall collection fund profile and the provisions in there. So there's a significant level of management action to looking to claw this back as much as we possibly can in year.
Can I just ask also about the primary drivers behind the 12.5 million overspend in the HRA?
There are a number of drivers. Shame John just left me. He must have known you were going to ask a question. Rent collection voids, but the most predominant area here is obviously the council and the department having to flex to increase the level of resources and support in relation to the regulatory items, so that we can deliver on the ambitious action plan which we've shared with the regulator.
Okay, thank you. One last question, Abdul, or have you...
And I was just going to ask about the capital programme underspend impact and what's the impact of the 6.4 million underspend on the capital programme, and how will these funds be reallocated or carried forward in future projects?
So the capital programme elements which are mentioned here are pretty much slippage in year, so they will move into future years. But obviously, as I said earlier, we do need to review particularly the housing capital programme to ensure that we're freeing up resources to ensure that we are targeting the regulatory issues. Where there is slippage in the capital programme, which is funded through prudential borrowing, then obviously that means that the Treasury management position is improved. And again, if you refer back to the period 3 report, you'll see that we estimate that there will be an improvement in year of around about £1 million in relation to the delays in relation to undertaking the approved borrowing. So that is a positive which falls into the general fund, and obviously the appropriate borrowing for the housing fund, housing revenue account, it is recognised in there.
Tim, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Thanks. Yeah, probably something I could have raised under the minutes, actually, but it's appropriate to raise it here. At the last meeting in August, I did ask about programmes which had been approved by the previous administration, but which had been might have been paused in the current year, and the financial impact that might have had. And I was promised a list. I know John has just departed, but I believe the list has got not just growth and regen, but across all the departments. So just going to ask when we can expect to see an update on that.
Funny enough, I asked John that just before we came to the meeting, and he seemed to indicate that we should have it within the next week. But I'll keep you updated just to make sure.
Okay, thanks. Can I ask my second question as well? Just on the safety valve programme, can I now assume that we have accepted that we're running with the safety valve programme for the foreseeable future?
We're in discussions with the Department for Education. As you may have noted in the comments on the financial situation, we're not at the moment fully hitting our targets, so there are discussions ongoing with the DFE. Councillor Guy-Landris and then Councillor Mack.
Thanks, Chair. That does lead on nicely onto my question, which is about the dedicated schools grant. I mean, the figures are large and not very pleasant, so we tend to avoid talking about them. But I guess we do need to look at them. There's been a further slippage. I mean, how concerned should we be, Tony?
Obviously, as you say, Councillor, these are not small sums. However, with the dedicated schools grants, the safety valve agreement, this falls back onto the balance sheet currently, and we have a dispensation for a couple of years to allow that to continue. We have issues in year in relation to, as I said earlier, further demand and some delays in relation to some of the alternatives which we're looking to pursue. plans are being put in place to accelerate those in future years, so that actually if you looked at the overall deficit curve in this area, we are anticipating that we would see the level of improvement or very similar to the level of improvement which we'd anticipated at the start of the safety valve arrangement. So it is about trying to catch up in that space. But yeah, yes, it is significant. So.
Councillor Mack.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we absolutely highlight the position of the savings here, with only 65% forecast to be delivered, which is similar to our forecasts to what we delivered, I think, over the previous years. And I think looking at that and how hard we are finding it to deliver savings, we should question the assumptions that went into this budget. And yeah, how we confirmed or made the plans for this financial year, and then cannot deliver on it at all.
I don't think that was a question, that was a comment. Councillor Reynard.
Yes, well, I think Councillor Mackey, you're always keen to use more of the reserves, which is a good job we haven't done so, isn't it, given the need for them this year. I think I wanted to dip into some things around actually demand for services, because we've talked about historic delivery of savings or not. I think the elephant in the room feels like some of the actual absolute pressures that we're facing, particularly in children's services, where we're 25.2 million over budget in year at the moment, which is largely being driven by out-of-area children's placements, isn't it? So, as well as just over 5 million in terms of homelessness as well. So, you know, there's 30 million of extra costs that we've already got in year, some of which maybe could have been anticipated, maybe not. And we'll probably have that political debate till the cows come home. But I guess what I'm interested in is what else we can do to mitigate some of that in year as well, because you know, we're just taking a sufficiency strategy through the Children and Young People's Policy Committee, for example? Are we looking at opportunities to buy more children's homes that we could be placing in, so that we can sever the link between our accommodation provision and care package? Some of our children, Gorham Homes are building houses. Are we going to put some more of those as potential children's homes to try and relieve some of our pressures? Obviously, I've already mentioned about acquisition, so I look forward to an update about that. But it feels like we need to also make sure we're keeping on top of some of those things and really accelerating some of those things. And you know, when we're looking at revising capital programs, I think we need to be thinking about the general fund, and do we need to be moving some capital prioritisation around, so actually we focus it on buying more children's homes in the area and cracking on, even if that's now we're in September. I appreciate we might not get much benefit this year, but we do need to get on top of it, because if even more children go out of area next year, it's going to continue to get worse, and I'm really concerned we're just not gripping it.
All of the above that you've said, and but in addition, because I don't think you mentioned it, and it's an important element as well, is to try to curb the demand as well through better early intervention and family engagement, and the avoidance of children being taken into care in the first place, which is an important part of the transformation programme. And the best local authorities will intervene earlier to avoid what is often a poor outcome for the young person, as well as a greater cost for the council in a child being taken into care in the first place. So that curbing of the demand is more difficult to do in year. It's probably a multi-year change, but in Bristol, too many children are being taken into care in the first place. So I think the focus needs to be on trying to avoid that situation arising in the first place, as well as all of the things that you mentioned, Councillor Reynard.
Yeah, just to point out, you're absolute fan of prevention, and anything we can do to prevent, particularly for those, in this case, children and young people, and make sure they have the best possible outcomes. And it's my background's like in mental health as well, and you know we've seen how poor the outcomes could be when people end up there. So it is important. One of the other things I just wanted to ask about, was a bit of a follow-up, was around Section 117 aftercare. I appreciate it's a bit specific one. Have we managed to resolve the differences with the integrated care system around who's paying what?
No, we have not. So, and regrettably, and that remains a position of contention between us and our colleagues in the NHS, both in relation to children specifically, and also adults in Section 117. And so we continue to talk to our NHS colleagues at the most senior levels about the need to resolve that and to find a way through a significant difference between the council and our position and the position currently of the NHS.
And just for the clarity of the committee, could you outline what the current position is and how that compares with what's probably more standard across other local authorities?
Well, it is that the City Council's position is that the sort of the norm and standard practice is an equality of funding between the NHS and the local authority in mental health provision, whereas the typical situation in Bristol is that the City Council is taking 70% of the strain, with the minority 30% burden being carried by the NHS. And yeah, I mean, and in relation to children, the position is particularly serious, where we have some examples of an absence of contribution altogether on the part of the NHS. So these are issues that the Chief Executive of the Integrated Care Board and I discussed on Friday and have discussed before. Obviously, we want to work in very close partnership with our NHS colleagues, and we completely understand that the NHS also has its own significant pressures, and so we continue to work with our colleagues with the aim of concluding a non-litigious outcome to these differences.
And just
last one, Tom.
Yeah, so it's a follow-up to that. So it's two parts. So do you have an anticipated timeline, I guess, for the outcome of that, of any dates you're able to share? And could you just kind of appreciate maybe an approximate figure? Could you just kind of explain to us what that, I'm assuming it's millions. What's the extra cost is that causing by it not being 50-50, it being 70-30, or in some cases 100-none?
I mean, we certainly are talking about millions.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to put a precise figure on it, but you know, it's a significant figure of millions. And in terms of a time frame, I'd be disappointed if we won't be able to report progress during my tenure here as interim chief executive. In other words, at the end of the year. Yeah.
Can we get that figure shared once it's I appreciate it. I just want to take away. It'd be really useful just to understand the exact nature of that pressure. Thank you.
Okay, Tim.
Yeah, thanks. Just wanted to pick up on what Councillor Mack said about savings delivery. I was under the impression that the figures that I'd seen was that in previous years we've been on an upward trajectory for delivering our savings, and I thought we got to in the 80% area. So if that's not right, then where were we about last year? How much of our savings did we deliver last year?
So we were around the 2/3 mark last year. I think the in-year position, Councillor, which you may be referring to, was a hope to deliver around about 80%. But once we did the final sort of adding up the final sort of reconciliation at the end of the financial year, some of that which had been reported was mitigation rather than the ongoing delivery of those savings. So although the departments did manage to significantly mitigate the position, it wasn't on an ongoing basis, so therefore that's why we ended up with the shortfall.
Okay, thanks. I did want to ask a question about. I appreciate that some of this is kind of veering off into other territories, but it is the report has come to our committee. So I was just going to ask about delivery of SEN provision, which I think is part of the mitigations that we've got in place for our education budget. Is the delivery of new SEN provision on track, or is that one of the delays that's causing the shortfall?
I believe that there are delays in that area, but it would be for the Director of Children's to give you any particular detail.
I think what I'll just add to that as well is I think all of us are aware that this is an issue. It's not just affecting Bristol, it's affecting other local authorities as well. And in particular, to add to that as well, is, as you see in the report that we're about to note, our deficit is continuing to increase. It's not as much as it was before we entered the safety valve, because clearly, as part of the safety valve, the DFE are writing off some of the deficit on a regular period, but at the moment it is still increasing higher than what's being written off. And I think it's also worth adding that my understanding is we do pay interest on that deficit as well. Is that correct?
Technically speaking, we're running a deficit which has to be financed. So yes, there is technically cash flow issues and therefore interest.
And I think we are, and we remain hopeful that the new government will bring in a review of our not just for ourselves, but for other local authorities as well. Because clearly this is a problem that's been around since changes in 2014, and year after year, despite numerous efforts, the situations have got worse. And that's not just in this authority, it's also in other local authorities as well. If there's no more question, this report is for noting, and you have to bear with me while I take a glass of water, because last time I had a long list and I had a sore throat, and then I got accused of deliberately not reading out something. So, the committee notes, 1, the Council's unchanged general fund forecast Outturn revenue overspend of 22.3 million at P4 24-25 against the Council approved budget of 533.7 million. 2, the unchanged performance on delivery of savings, which is in Appendix A1, Section 3, Tables 2A and 2B. 3, the unchanged additional rated net risk of 10.5 million per the Risk and Opportunities Register, which is in Appendix A1, Section 4, Tables 3A and 3B. 4, the Council's Outturn position of £12.5 million overspend within the housing revenue account to be transferred to the HRA General Reserve at the year end, Appendix A1, Section 5.2. 5, the Council's Outturn position of a net £13 million overspend in the dedicated schools grant following the application of the DFE's 24-25 safety valve, combined with contribution from the General Fund, and that a total of £50.1 million is forecast to be carried forward at the year end in the DSE Deficit Reserve, which is in Appendix A1, Section 5.3. 6, the unchanged break-even position on public health services, Appendix A1, Section 5.4. 7, the unchanged break-even position on the Bristol Harbour Fund, which is Appendix A1, Section 5.5. And 8, the Council's unchanged forecast underspend of £6.4 million against the capital programme revised budget 24-25, comprised of £7 million overspend on the General Fund and a £0.6 million overspend on the HRA. This is in Appendix A1, Section 6. So can I take those items as noted? Thank you. We'll now move backwards through the agenda and move to agenda item number 14. There is an exempt section to this, but I suspect we will not go into it, but if we need to, then we will have to move into a exempt section. So this report provides an overview of the debt position across revenues and benefits, parking services, housing revenue account, which includes current and former tenant rent arrears and leasehold and temporary accommodation, and sundry debt, including adult social care. And it details the steps being taken to improve collection across a number of service areas. The report also provides details of those sums written off in line with the corporate debt management policy and scheme of delegations during the period 1st of April 2023 to the 31st of March 2024. There are no decisions to be taken on this report, which is for information, and I'd like to invite Graham Clapp, Head of Revenue and Benefits, to introduce and outline the report. Graham, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This will be very brief because I was going to read that bit. I'm going to hand over to Jane Hadley, who manages the income collection team, and she's going to take you through a summary of the report.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So whilst the report covers the main sources of income, it's not an exhaustive list of all of our incomes, and worth noting as well that the amounts quoted in it are not necessarily overdue, as at the 31st of March. They may have been billed or invoiced in March and not due until April. So various income streams are collected by the council. They can be statutory, like council tax and business rates. They can be for services provided, like garden waste collections, or perhaps under a contract, like council rents, for example. Dependent on the income type, they can be paid by regular instalments, they can be paid in advance, or they can be paid as a one-off payment following an invoice. Recovery methods for unpaid income also will vary. Some are specified in statute, but all will be managed within the council's financial regulations and the corporate debt management policy, which provides the framework for a fair and consistent approach to all debtors. We're very aware of the continued economic pressure on households and on businesses, and we take all the steps we can to engage at the earliest opportunity with those who are struggling, to give them time to agree an affordable payment plan. Debt quickly builds up to unmanageable levels if people miss instalments. And if we take, for instance, council tax, more people are electing to pay over 12 months rather than 10. So ongoing instalments would have to be increased if people are to catch up, and that can impact significantly on household budgets over long periods. It's more difficult to collect older debt. It's usually we would get more queries about it, and people's circumstances will have changed. They may have moved, and that makes it harder to trace them. So just to pick up on a few of the detail points within the report, we promote payment by direct debit wherever possible. Not only is that safe and convenient for our customers, but it's also low cost for the council. And we've now enabled this facility for people to set up a direct debit online to pay accounts receivable debts. We've injected additional resources into council tax and business rate teams over the year. Issuing the backlog of recovery notices prompted a great many people to report changes in their circumstances. And whilst business rates work levels are now more normal, council tax is still receiving unprecedented levels of contact. Recovery of overpaid housing benefit from ongoing entitlement was resumed during the year, whilst direct debits or collection direct from earnings are common payment options for those who no longer receive housing benefit. In the housing revenue account, there was improvement in collection rates on the previous year and a reduction in the number of cases in large arrears. Although service charges for those in temporary accommodation increased, this really just reflects the increase in the numbers of households that were placed in emergency accommodation. With parking, collection of penalty charge notices improved as collection processes were re-established. And data is also provided in the report for the clean air zone. We're seeing increased compliance with the scheme as it's being rolled out, and this is reducing the number of PCNs being issued. People can use our 24-hour automated payment line to pay many bills or invoices, and the cost of this service to people for paying has now reduced now that the premium rate phone number has been replaced. We've held quarterly debt clinics in libraries across the city, and we've had additional sessions at some food banks. Although invitations were sent to debtors in each vicinity, take-up is generally low. However, support has been provided to some complex cases. Front-facing officers continue to refer people into the debt support referral service for help and signposting with benefits or debts and to make payment arrangements. Largely that's in respect of council tax arrears. And we have also sought to support people who are exiting breathing space but don't have a debt resolution. But we've found some difficulties engaging with those people. So service areas do take all appropriate steps to collect income due to the council, but inevitably some is eventually deemed to be unrecoverable, and the amounts written off during the financial year for the service areas have been detailed at the end of the report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jane. And before I pass over to members, I think it's also worth pointing out that, even though there is a large number of, or a large total next to the debt figures for the council. I think it's also worth mentioning, as Councillor Whippington touched upon earlier, we've had COVID, we've had inflation, we've had a cost of living crisis, and many of our residents are struggling to put food on the table, let alone pay council tax and other payments. We are obviously facing a financial situation, which means that we do want to and intend to collect as much of the arrears as possible, but we also have an ethical debt collection policy, and we have a responsibility to our residents to ensure that we do not put them in further distress because of our approach to debt collection. I'll now pass over to Councillor Gillandris, who was first.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of comments and one specific question, if I may. In terms of comments, the council tax arrears figure is unfortunate and sad to see, but I guess there are cost of living pressures. Maybe it's a reflection that council tax is now becoming a big chunk of everybody's outgoings, actually, because the amount has gone up quite dramatically in recent years. The other sort of just comment is on accounts receivable, the up to 90 days figure, that includes invoices raised in the month. So I don't know whether it's possible to strip them out, because it will sort of distort your figures, because the more pertinent figures, probably the 90 to 365 days and the over a year, are actually going down. So that we've actually got a good result there. The question I've got is a specific one, because I'm puzzled and I just don't understand it. It says clean air zone, parking services, outstanding debt. Now, I hope I'm reading the figure correctly. It says £32 million. Is that right?
Yes, that's the figure I was given.
That's outstanding.
Yes.
We've got, but that's, let's call them £10 a go. That's 321,000 fines unpaid. I don't understand the figure. So any clarity or light you can shine on that, I'd be very grateful.
I'm not directly involved in parking, but I can get some further clarification for you.
Yeah, I mean, the figure just is a bit mind-boggling, that's all.
Yeah.
Chair, obviously, if the payment's not made within 6 days, then it moves to the higher payment level. So it moves from the 9 up to the 90, I think, almost 90. So
I've got a feeling it's 70.
70. Oh, he says haven't paid it once.
Okay, so the figure might, if we looked at 30 stuff that hadn't been paid in 30 days, the figure would be a lot lower. Hopefully, perhaps we'll get, if you could have some clarification on that, because just looking at it is sort of a little bit frightening, the totality of it.
We'll approach parking and get them to break down the difference between people who've not paid the first amount and the escalation.
Can I just add as well on the up to 90 days? Yes, this is a standard template that this report has been used for a while now, and I will be looking to make changes to better reflect that over 30 days position, to try and give a clearer picture of what is overdue versus what is outstanding.
And to be fair to Jane, we have already slightly modified the report, so we can modify it again. We can adjust it so that it gives councillors more of the information that they want. Councillor Renard.
Yeah, I mean, some of that to change the result as what I'd asked for. Cause I think really important to understand what is the. I mean, most things are sort of within 30 days, aren't they? Not all, but you know, understanding what is that, and it's outstanding because it's not been paid yet, but it's within the expected time frame to still be settled. Versus is all the money that we're owed that actually has been gone beyond the due date, and make sure we're really clear on that. I think it is really helpful because otherwise it just gets. Well, there's been reporting on it today, hasn't there? It's focused on the total figure. I think it's making sure that we do understand, so that we understand as committee members where action's being targeted to deal with the outstanding, as well as make sure that people are paying within the window that they should be. And I was looking through the HRA figures and noting that we're on a 99.24% collection rate for the last financial year. Is that above the sector average? Do we know?
I don't, I'm afraid. I did ask if they had any benchmarking data, but they don't collect it.
Interesting, because they used to. So might be
Yes,
worth
they used
clarifying.
to. I believe they said that they used to collect it because they had a subscription to
Housemark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they no longer have that.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, like Councillor Galland just said, I'd welcome a bit of a deeper understanding of what's going on with that clean air zone money, because that's a huge figure, and obviously there's plans for investing the money that is being generated by the clean air zone into improving, the quality of air and to support the bus routes and all sorts. So probably important we understand how that's impacting what could happen there.
Councillor Whipton had his hand up, but I thought I saw a hand going up elsewhere, but sorry if I missed you. Councillor Whipton.
Thanks. Yeah. I noticed our in-year collection's up slightly on last year, but I also noticed that you say there's an additional letter going out this year in terms of chasing people before they owe. Do you think that's having an impact on the amount that we're collecting?
So the corporate debt management policy introduced let's call it a pre-reminder. So if we're looking at the statutory incomes like council tax and business rates, they have a formal reminder process. The corporate debt management policy introduced an additional one. So as soon as an instalment is missed, that pre-reminder is issued to all council taxpayers. I think it possibly has the effect of delaying people's actions because it means that they don't contact us quite so soon. And obviously it's really important that we engage with people at the earliest opportunity. But yes, it does go out in all cases.
So I guess at some point we should be doing some sort of analysis of what the impact of that letter is on our collection rates and whether it's actually improving them or having the opposite. Because obviously if people don't respond, then their debt builds up.
Yes, exactly. And as I highlighted with council tax, with more people paying over 12 months, that does have a detrimental effect on people when they miss instalments, because there's no months in which to sort of reschedule instalments over without increasing the amount they've got to pay each month.
Okay, do I have any more questions or comments? Abdul.
Yeah, I just want to ask a couple of questions really. One is which areas of debt have been identified maybe as particularly challenging or at high risk of non-recovery? Would we have...
Councillor Malik, can we not ask that question? We do not want to highlight which debtors may have a better chance of getting away with if they don't pay.
It's the exempt paper.
Okay, so I'll go to my second question then. And how are ethical and social factors considered when we're deciding on debt recovery and maybe writing things off?
Well, again, I would probably say that the decisions that we might take to write off a debt, again, could lead people's behaviour, so possibly that should also be exempt. But we do obviously consider very carefully individual circumstances when we are looking at all write-offs.
Well, I say, Councillor Malik, it is very likely we will go into exempt section at some point, and you may want to ask that question then, if you're available to stay behind just for that. But do I have any more questions or comments? I'll take that as a no. Okay. This report is for noting, so notwithstanding Councillor Malik may have a couple of questions in the exempt section, what I'm going to ask is that the Committee for Strategy and Resources note the report. Can I take this report as so noted? Okay, thank you. That brings us on to agenda item number 13. As somebody who has come from an IT background, I always get very nervous when I say we're going to have a discussion about cyber security maturity assessment and procurement of a managed service. We are going to start this off in public session, but if we do need to, we will move into exempt session for reasons which I hope will be clear to all members. We may have to kick some officers out. So, agenda item number 13, this report informs the committee of the outcomes of an independent cyber security maturity assessment and seeks approval to procure and award a contract for a managed extended defence and response service. This is a third-party provision of 24/7 cyber security monitoring and active defence against cyber attacks. This report also proposes a small in-house staffing increase to ensure the councils can further strengthen cyber security in line with the risk appetite. This is a key decision as it involves spend of over £500,000. As I said, if we need to go into a SEM session, we will do, because even though there may be no members of the public physically present, we are, of course, being webcast. I would like now to invite Tim Barrett, the Director of Policy, Strategy and Digital, to introduce and outline the report. Tim?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So, as the Chair set out, this is giving you the full results of a recent independent maturity assessment of our cybersecurity. That full report is in your exempt appendix, so you do have all the detail at your hands. Obviously, cyber is a key issue for the Council, and it's been a high issue on our risk register for some time. And that's been the focus of much of our IT improvement work in recent years. So whilst we have done certainly a lot of improvement and security hardening work as part of the Council's digital transformation, what we haven't had in recent years is a sort of holistic overview of cybersecurity maturity and threat. We have had several audits and inspections which have picked up that learning in their own rights, but typically about very specific niche parts of the business rather than this more rounded view. So to help Corporate Leadership Board and Committee form its formal risk appetite and get a rounded view of what to do next, we commissioned this review to give us that best picture for you. So this has been undertaken by external experts using the National Institute of Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework. There are many different competing cybersecurity frameworks, but that is one of the most robust. We have then reviewed the outcome of that report and discussed that with corporate leadership boards, and now have a board-agreed risk appetite for cyber. CLB have set that at cautious, and that would lead you to expecting risk score of around 12 or medium, but perhaps be able to tolerate a higher risk for short periods of time or for a specific use case. However, our risk is at level 20 and has been, as I say, for some time. And so the measures suggested in this report are our best professional advice of how to address that risk and bring it down to your accepted target level as an organisation. Perhaps unusually for reports we would normally bring to committee, I do want to stress that this is an unfunded ask, so we are bringing the committee report and the results to you for your view and for an in-principle key decision. But you will note the advice in this report that is subject to the outcome of the medium-term financial strategy and the Council's budget setting in February. So effectively what we're asking today is to be in a good position to move this forward as and when we are able to within the confines of the Council's budget. Clearly, if the Council cannot identify a budget, then it's something that we can't move ahead with and would need to do what we can with existing resources to mitigate that risk. Hopefully that gives you an overview without going into the detail. Very happy to discuss the detail of the report and some of the consideration that's brought us to this point, but that may be best for exempt session. Just finally, before I wrap up, in agenda conference we were asked to provide a bit of a breakdown of the separate lines between contract costs and staff cost. So just to flag, that's been included now in the report and is on page 123 and 124 of your packs today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Any comments or questions? Councillor Renard, you look reluctant to put your hand up then, but...
I think mine are fine for non-exempt sessions. That's what I was just like weighing up. So, I mean, it seems pretty vital we do this, doesn't it, really? Because the costs of not having our systems secure are huge, both financially and in terms of the impact that it'd have on the people who can't access data sets that we need to deliver various services to people across the city. So that's the first observation. So it's fully in support of this subjective identification of the funding in the subsequent budget process. And I think the other observation I just make is it's interesting we've been able to find a way to do that, because I sat in a briefing for the Economy and Skills Policy Committee meeting this morning, where they said we couldn't approve funding not already covered in the budget for a different item. So it's a bit interesting. We seem to have different approaches for different committees. So it might be something for us to just address, because we should be able to use the wording you've used here and drop that into the relevant Economy and Skills paper. I can pick that up with you, Councillor Dyer, separately if you'd like. That was it, really.
Okay, so I think that was a comment more than a question. Councillor Mack.
Mine might be a comment and maybe a clarification and maybe a question. My understanding from what you've just said is, can we write you a blank cheque? Not quite. But it is what are we aiming for? And this is what you will then put forward to aim for next year's budget. But it's not asking for money now. So I think that might be the difference.
No, it is. There
are
figures if you said papers.
Okay. It's asking for money now and in the future.
Just to confirm, we're seeking permission to spend once the money is identified. So that you can't give us money now because the council is overspending. So we're seeking permission to spend should the budget be identified, so that the day after full council in February, hopefully we'd be able to move straight away.
Okay, any other questions, comments, statements? John.
Just really to say again what Thomas said in a different way. It's a bit like insurance. Nobody wants to pay for an insurance policy, but it's pretty painful if you don't have an insurance policy and you have a claim. And it's, so it's the same with cyber security. You have to have it. I don't think we've got much choice. So.
Councillor Malik.
Do we have any figures about the potential kind of savings, compared to what's been happening in the past, or without disclosing too much, but what are the 3.2 million that we're going to spend, what it could potentially cost us if something was to go wrong, basically?
Yes, thank you. We do. It's one of those things that's quite difficult to quantify, because of course it can take many different forms, and a successful attack could be on a particular service, and it may last a few hours. It's fairly rare to see attacks that affect fundamentally your entire infrastructure or something catastrophic, but it does happen. So we've included that in the report, actually, at paragraph 9, where these have been publicly reported figures. Hackney had a major cybersecurity incident. As of 2022, some 4 years later, they were still reporting a cost of £12.5 million of responding to that. And obviously, years later, we're still disrupted in certain services. Redcar and Cleveland reported over £10 million of direct costs. So I would say those are obviously at the most serious end of the scale. But that's your worst case scenario. Obviously, those aren't common, those incidences. We are in a much stronger place than we've been in the past. We're certainly not lacking in security, but nevertheless, there's always more you can do to improve, and this is obviously an ever-evolving picture.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, well, this requires a vote, and hopefully when I read out what you're voting on, it also clarify what you're being asked for as well. So the proposal is that the Committee for Strategy and Resources, 1, authorises the Director, Policy, Strategy and Digital, in consultation with the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, the Director of Finance and the Director of Legal and Democratic Services, to procure and award a managed extended defence and response contract in line with the maximum budget envelopes outlined in the report, subject to identification of that funding within the medium-term financial plan and the setting of the council's budget for 25-26. And 2, authorises the Director of Policy, Strategy and Digital to invoke any subsequent extensions or variations specifically defined in the contracts being awarded up to the maximum budget envelope outlined in this report. Can I get a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Okay, can I ask for a vote for all those in favour? That seems to be unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we now move on to what potentially could be the last agenda item. I'll wait for Tom to vacate. Don't want to get you to trouble.
Chair, I know we've only got one more agenda item, but is there any chance we could have a couple of minutes comfort break? I think I've seen a few people kind of jump out quickly.
Is everybody okay for just for 2-3 minutes? Okay. So just for clarity, we are going to start this item in public session. If we do need to go into a seventh session, we will move into a separate room. But regardless, we do need to come back to public session to make the decision in public. Okay, so agenda item 12 is the future of the Bottle Yard Studios. This report reviews the current operation and business model of the Bottle Yard Studios and proposes for its future. This is a key decision as it affects 2 or more wards. I would now like to invite Alex Hearn, Director of Economy of Place, to introduce and outline the report. Alex.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. So, the Bottle Yard Studios has become a significant component of the high-end TV production landscape, and the council has a long-term and funded commitment to the studios going back to 2010. And despite the myriad priorities, complexities and challenges of local government, the council and the operating team, they've created something impressive. This paper and the recommendations in here is not about a fire sale to raise money. This is a recommendation based on evidence from a planned project that started at the end of 2022. And the paper recommends a particular course of action on the basis of 3 main factors, really. One is there is a strategic growth opportunity presented for the studios in the form of the former Matthew Clark site now becoming vacant, and that significantly extends the opportunity for investment and growth. There are changes in the TV and film production and investment landscape, and there is now quite significant interest from production companies and their investors in ownership of studios in the UK and Europe, and with transactions elsewhere in the UK, there is an opportunity here for the council to explore. And then thirdly, we may reflect on whether, bearing in mind those complexities and challenges of local government, the council can really provide that focused leadership and the investment with purpose and nimble operational management that the growth of these studios, I think, requires. If you support this recommendation, it wouldn't be taken lightly, of course, and the significance of it is fully understood by the management team at the studios and me as a director and an officer of the council. But I think this is about recognising where the studios has got to and its potential to grow and thrive in the city, and whether the council really is best placed to be the custodian of that ambition. So the paper recommends that the committee approves a proposal to identify a purchaser, to enable and effectively to enable marketing to complete and then due diligence to be undertaken, and then by delegation to allow a decision to be taken by the Exec Director of Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the leader, Directors of Finance and Legal Democratic Services. So if the committee supports those recommendations, that does not mean that studios will be sold, but there would still be a lot of due diligence required, and the tests for supporting a disposal will have a high bar. And as a freeholder of the site, we would retain influence over the future of the site, and we are looking for an organisation that can be a city partner in that endeavour. So that's all I'll say at this moment, and happy to put it back to the chamber. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Councillor King.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just going to make a couple of practical points around challenges that I've had on this. So there was a briefing set up in July, which I accepted the invite for, and then it was cancelled. And then the one was set up in August, which I was unable to make due to being on annual leave. Neither was Councillor Renard, who would have had to exempt herself anyway, but neither was Councillor Rippington. So none of the Labour members on this have unfortunately had a briefing on it yet, and that wasn't rearranged by officers, which is a bit unfortunate. Secondly, on the ModGov, I've only just realised today that I've got a different version of the paper that everyone else does. I don't have the exempt one. So I realised that was also sent through by Ian at 11:30 today, but I was at work till 2 o'clock today, so I've had very limited time to look at the exempt papers. And then a separate point on, like, if one of our members has to recuse himself due to an interest, I find it problematic that we can't substitute that with another member of our group in order to kind of have that democratic proportionality here. So I think that's a bit of a shame that we can't substitute a member of the group for a particular item when that affects our numbers as a group proportionally. But just, it makes it difficult, the whole thing, for me to make a sound decision based on the sort of lack of information, access to information that I've had up until a couple of hours ago.
Ian, did you want to?
Just to clarify, there may have been problems in accessing the papers, but the confidential papers were circulated through ModernGov at one and the same time as the public papers were published. On the substitution point, the Constitution is very clear that a substitute member must be there for the whole meeting. That's the constitutional position on that. So. Okay,
on that first bit though, I don't know why, but I don't have the R that I can see that others have. Right, so Councillor Malik also doesn't have access to that same paper, it would appear. I don't know why that's happened, obviously, but I wasn't aware that I had a different paper until I compared it with Councillor Rippington at 2 o'clock today, and I saw that we had a different one.
Can I do my tech support role? There are different ways to set up ModGov, and there's a way that you have to sign in, which I think might even be downloading a slightly different version, because I've just been trying to help Abdul on this. So I assume you don't need to sign in when you open ModGov? No. So, because I did previously have this, so this is an unfortunate issue that some people won't have been aware of, and therefore they are accessing ModGov, but only the public documents and not the exempt documents.
Okay, but before I go on to anyone else, in terms of substitutes, obviously there is the ability for substitutes to sit on the committee, which is why Councillor Classic is here substituting for Caroline Goots. What the Constitution does not allow, and I don't think that's something that's changed, that was also ongoing previously and hasn't changed since we moved to the new system. So what could have happened is, if Councillor Renard wanted to, he could have had somebody substituting for the entire meeting, and then there would be the ability to vote on this. Clearly, Councillor Renard felt there were other items on this agenda that he needed to vote on or to note. Potentially, that could be a proposal we could bring forward for a change to the Constitution, but unfortunately, I can't change the Constitution as it stands at the moment. And in terms of people being on holiday at the same time, I can't really change that. We didn't, to be honest, it wasn't something where we decided to bring this particular report when certain individuals were on holiday at the same time. That wasn't intentional. But we will have to bring items to the committee, particularly, to be frank, when we are being criticised for not making decisions quickly enough. We don't want to give further reasons for delaying decisions and moving them to another date because certain people are not available. In terms of how we move forward from here, I mean, we have brought the report to be voted on. I'm happy that we will proceed with that and to listen to what officers have said and for members to have their comment. In terms of access to ModGov and the problems that, again, that is something outside the remit of my control and it's probably something that needs to be taken up with Democratic Services. I'm sorry it's inconvenienced you, but I only have, no, even as leader of the council, I only have limited areas that I can take responsibility for. Councillor Stafford Townsend.
I was just going to say on the mod.gov issue, it was a problem that hasn't just been in this term, it's been a long-standing one. So I was wondering if, particularly for the benefit of new councillors, Democratic Services could recirculate the explanation as to how to access the redacted and confidential bits of mod.gov, and possibly, and one of the things I used to ask for as chair of DC, just as an accessibility thing, was that Democratic Services circulated the PDFs of all of the papers rather than just circulating a link. It meant that we could access stuff that we couldn't without being on the internet.
Yeah, well, regardless, it probably sounds like something that's been brought up at party group leaders for further discussion, but it's not really a topic for us to discuss at this meeting or with the strategy and resources meeting. Obviously, there is a forum for issues with access to information to be brought, and in most cases that would be party group leaders, I would have thought, but we could ask our party group leaders to bring that forward. Councillor Rippington.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to stay on the kind of procedural at the moment. I think with the briefing, I don't think any of us realised that briefing was going to be. I thought it was just a briefing on what the bottle yard would, was and how it worked and that kind of thing. I don't think that. Well, I don't know because it wasn't there. I don't know whether it was a briefing that would directly have had an impact on how I feel about this today. So. But if it was, then I do think it would have been on officers to ensure that we were properly briefed on it if it was something that was, coming to a committee and we were expected to make a decision on a bit later. I think the way we feel is that we don't really have enough information at the moment for us to make a proper decision on this right now.
Councillor Gillandris.
I think it's what's being sought at the moment actually is simply an agreement to explore a possible sale. That's all we're being asked for at the moment. So I'm always happy to consider selling anything at the right price. So I've got a very open mind about it. And we have sold assets before, the port, the airport. We had investments. Good opportunity to realise them, and I think it's the same here, as you quite rightly said, Alex. We're absolutely not looking at a fire sale. We're actually looking at an opportunity here. If the price is right, if the opportunity is right, that's what we're being asked for, and I'm quite content to give that agreement in principle.
Councillor Stafford Townsend.
I just wanted to say that I was quite surprised that former cabinet members and the group whip are surprised about how this works and how to find information. I think it's just surprising that you didn't know how any of this works up until this point in time, because none of this is new.
I've never had a paper like that come through on ModGov before where I've not had the same version as other people. It's just a unique experience. I don't see why I should necessarily have had insider knowledge on how to do that.
Alex.
Thanks. If I could just comment on the issue of briefing, and I'm sorry that some members were unable to be there. This has, of course, been to policy chairs' briefings. I think it's been to strategy and resources policy chairs' briefing twice. We've had a joint meeting also with strategy and resources and economy and skills. There was a site visit. We also invited ward councillors, local ward councillors, to a meeting. So I feel that there has been some good briefing. Of course, not everyone can always make every meeting. So I'm sorry if people have been unable to attend those. Just on the point, Councillor Gillandris, you make, just to reinforce, this is a project that started at the end of 2022. And in February last year, there was some soft market testing started. So this isn't a new thing. This is something that we are continuing. It's testing the water. It's not confirming a decision.
Sorry.
Thank you. I mean, what I wanted to add was that, as the paper says, there's been sort of soft market testing, essentially preparing the market for the decision that we anticipate members will take now. So I think it could be quite unfortunate, really, to suspend a decision in effect to proceed for a further month, because there's a risk of marching the market up the top of the hill and marching them back down again. That may inhibit a sort of stronger market response. People might get cold feet, wonder if the council is serious about decision making in this area. So I think it's preferable if the committee is able to take a clear decision this afternoon. And I've not talked to my colleagues about this, but my own feeling would be it would be better to proceed with recommendation 1 and with recommendation 2, which is the delegation element of settling the terms of disposal potentially, for that to come back to the committee, given that you meet every month, rather than postpone altogether the decision to proceed, which is bound to delay our process. So I guess what I would urge is, if at all you find it possible to permit the commencement of the process, in order that we can at least see what kind of offers we get. Thank you.
John.
Yes, I mean, obviously, it's still fairly early days in the committee process. I don't want to just run through all the processes, but I thought, Chair, it might be worth just flagging as well. Of course, we had the agenda briefing on the 2nd of September, a couple of weeks ago, where there was a draft of the paper and, all parties were represented. I think it was Councillor Renhold there. It would be very clear to everyone there what the paper was about, and indeed what the content of the paper was.
Okay. I have to say I'm quite disappointed with this. What I'm going to do is I am going to propose that we go to a vote on number 1, and on item number 2, that we authorise for it to go to settle the terms of disposal and negotiate, but we also arrange a briefing. No, I'm not taking your point at this moment, Councillor Whippington. Now, we arrange a briefing for this committee in exempt session, and you have the ability to raise points and discuss and feed into me, and I'll take note of what your views are and what your comments are. Is that satisfactory for members? So what I'm saying, you will be given the opportunity to get access to the papers that you have apparently not have access to prior to a second meeting in a exempt session, and then you have the opportunity to vote on the decision, and I will take note of that vote.
Am I allowed to ask a question on that?
Carry on, Councillor Whippleton.
So just to confirm, you're splitting the recommendation in 2, and we would just be voting on the first part of the recommendation now.
And then we'll vote on the second part when a report comes back. Is that acceptable to officers?
So I have to acknowledge that the market is looking for somebody it can engage with and can make a decision, and some of when we get to a point of due diligence, there'll be a need to respond nimbly but with surety. But I accept that it's important for the council to make its decision, so I think we can work with that.
Yeah, what I'm suggesting is that we don't need a full-blown strategy and resources meeting, that we can set up a meeting within the next 7 days.
Definitely that's acceptable, yeah.
So I was going to ask a couple of questions about the proposal, but are you saying that we can't ask questions about the proposal now?
You can ask questions about the proposal now, but what I'm suggesting is that if we're going to come back and do this again, you may want to reserve your questions for that meeting, but if you can ask the questions now if you want to.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit confused though, because we're coming back, we make the vote now and then have the briefing afterwards.
Hold on 1 second.
Can I possibly make a suggestion, Chair? You could take a vote on recommendation 1 at the moment. You could then agree to adjourn this meeting to be reconvened as soon as possible, when you could then consider the exempt report and take the decision on recommendation 2 in light of that, which would avoid having to arrange a new meeting. You could agree a reconvened session as soon as possible.
I think that's a sensible proposal, and just to make it clear, I don't think in any way that on the part of officers that we've taken a view that this is going to be sold come what may. I don't think that's our position at all. That we want to see what the market response is and if financially this makes sense. So I think just to be clear about it, that in no way are we saying we're on a one journey to disposal here. We need to see what the market response is, which I hope is a position that members can accept without prejudice. It's not a commitment to sell the site necessarily. It's to understand what those offers look like, and the conclusion could be, particularly the financial appraisal, which will be the critical element of this, I think. The conclusion might well be that we do not sell it on the part of officers. That could well be the recommendation, or conversely, it could be that, you know, that it's in the council's interest to do so. But in no way is this a set position on our part that this will result in a sale.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, but I'm confused at this proposal that we vote now and then have the briefing afterwards. What's the point of having the briefing after
Councillor
we've
Ripton, what we're
voted?
saying is that we vote on number 1, which is that the committee approves the proposal to identify a purchaser of the long leasehold interests of the Bottle Yard Studios. That's item number 1. We'll then adjourn the meeting until yourselves and Councillor King have had a chance to read the exempt sessions, and then we reconvene the meeting at the earliest possible opportunity after you've had an opportunity to read through the papers fully, and then we take a decision on the second part. Councillor Mack.
Sorry, may or may not be helpful. So 1 gives the opportunity to go out there and identify a purchaser, which I'm going to assume would be I mean, I might not know about timescales, but would assume would be a process of a month, or likely to be a month's worth of work. So I actually wonder if recommendation 2, rather than adjourning, whether recommendation 2 just comes back to October meeting rather than trying to have a different meeting in between. But I wonder, so still with the hope that recommendation 2 can be passed to authorise others to agree it, but that wouldn't happen until that meeting in about 4 weeks' time.
I think what we've heard is that any delay to making this decision could potentially prejudice the outcome of the decision. I think what we want to do is get to a place where we've either decided to go forward or to halt completely as quickly as possible in order to avoid prejudice in the market if we decide to do one outcome rather than the other outcome. So, as I said, my proposal is that the Committee for Strategy and Resources approves the proposal to identify a purchaser of the long leasehold interest of the Bottle Yard Studios. If the answer to that is no, then we don't really need to go with any further meeting. If the answer to that is that we approve, then the second part we can arrange to reconvene the meeting so we can then look in detail when everybody has had access to all of the information, and then we can make a decision now as a committee as to whether to proceed with agenda item 2 or not. That's my proposal. Councillor Whittington.
Can I just ask if there are financial implications on approving the first of those recommendations on its own?
Only insofar as it continues to give confidence to the market that we are looking to explore this. I don't think it creates a pressure. There is conversely, if there is a risk that or perceived to be a risk that the council can't take a decision, then it may constrain the interest in the studios.
Just a second, I just check. Were you meaning about whether there was going to be a cost to our own budget?
Yes. What I mean is, I think there's a cost associated with this paper, isn't there? 400 and something. I just meant what's the implication of if we approve the first half, we're approving the whole of that 400.
So that's a project budget, and if it's a really elongated delay, then it could create a pressure. If it's not substantial, then I think it's something that could be absorbed.
Okay. So I'm going to propose that the Committee for Strategy and Resources approves the proposer to identify a purchaser of the long leasehold interests of the Botteyard Studios. Can I get a seconder for that?
Seconded.
All those in favour raise their hands. I'll make that 5. All those against raise their hands. 3. So that motion is passed. That therefore means that we will adjourn the meeting and then reconvene the meeting at a time at the earliest possible ability. One, for everybody to have their ModGov resolved or any other issues resolved so that they can properly prepare for the meeting, and then we'll meet and take a decision on item number 2.
Will be a reconvene meeting, Chair.
A reconvene the meeting.
Chair, and we're obviously happy to provide briefings as well. We're obviously happy to provide briefings to anyone who wants a further briefing before that.
Okay, thank you. I think that's the last agenda item. So that's the end of the meeting. I'll see you very shortly.
The meeting stands adjourned, Chair. Yeah.
The meeting stands adjourned, sorry, not the end of the meeting.